Let's see. Good. So first of all, welcome everyone. This talk's title is "Vibing the Future with Angular." It's one of the interesting topics that I was hoping to get into and learn, and then also share with all of you as well. So just a bit about myself. My name is Mohammad Ahsan. I'm originally from Pakistan, from the city Karachi. I'm a Google developers expert in two categories: AI and Angular, and I've been a GDE for about 8 years now. I've spoken at, I would say, a minimum of 70 conferences in the past 10 years internationally. I'm also someone who loves to create code, publish it, help others as well. For example, if you're working with Angular, I hope you are because you're in this meetup. So you might be using this library called ngx device detector, which is for detecting what kind of device your Angular application is running on. So I'm the author of the library, and I think this is an old image. We recently crossed 13 million NPM installs, and I think over 5.5 thousand projects on GitHub just use that. I'm also someone who loves to hack, as in create projects under a lot of pressure, go to hackathons. So this is one of the hackathons that happened in Stockholm in Sweden, where I live right now. And I won the hackathon with this gentleman named Adam. So I've also been awarded a couple of awards. For example, the JS Hero of Education, something like that. And I've also been featured by Google a few times, including this one on their official LinkedIn when I was working with Gemini for a campaign. So moving forward, who here likes AI? Can I get some messages in the chat? I don't know if you have reactions here, but if you can type me, that would be nice. Yeah, we do have reactions. Good, awesome. That's nice because I want this to be a bit interactive as well, and hopefully we'll have some time for question answers as well. So who here likes to use AI just for coding, nothing else? Okay. Okay, I can see some reactions. Good. So do you know what I try to use AI for and where most of my time usually goes? It's actually something like this. But I don't want you to be confused with what you see here. It's not AI at all. This is my years of experience drawing and then improving the skills. But I wanted to take this to AI, and I was like, okay, how do I take this image, and I wanted to make it for a programmer and keep the weird pose as much realistically as possible. So I went to Gemini and I tried it out, and this is what it created. So I was like, okay, maybe it's okay. But I was like, no. Take this image and then take this guy and then generate something together. So this is what we got. As you can see, the most comfortable position you can code ever, if anyone wants to take inspiration. But even better, I don't know what the heck this is, and I surely don't want to know. Never coding like this. But you can see how I'm productive with AI. But come on a ride with me where we're going to discuss about a situation where every morning when working at Scania especially, and Scania is one of the biggest companies in Europe for creating trucks and vehicles. When I look at my backlog of features to build, I see something like this: 43 tickets, 2 weeks, and just one developer. I'm fortunate enough that there's one person who has just recently joined, but for the past 2 years, that has been the case. So when that was the case, essentially I found hope from one of the quotations from someone named Eddie Osmani, who used to lead the Chrome team, but he is now the director of AI at Google. So he says, good code is like a love letter to the next developer who will maintain it. In my city, among my friends and developers, we used to say, code in a way that the next developers remembers you with good words and not the other way around. So today's revelation is essentially what if AI could help us write those love letters? That is, write really good code, faster, better, and with less tears for the next developers to go with. So we have a dilemma, I think, where we usually see AI not to provide us nice things, or if it's providing us nice things that we are like, I'm not really now sure if I'm learning with AI or I'm not learning with AI, if I'm letting AI do too much, too less. There's a confusion still happening in the developers community. So when we talk about just Angular and even before that, just JavaScript, according to the web performance survey that happened, we now essentially have a 2.4 megabytes of JavaScript payload that we send, which is essentially 35% up from 2023. And this is average. I can definitely tell you that we ship much more JavaScript now than before because we have better internet, we have better machines, but we don't usually care about performance as much as we should. And according to the survey of web performance, only 31.2% of the sites they were passing the core web vitals. So if you are someone who looks at into performance or SEO, you may already know that core web vitals include metrics as in when your page loads, how much time does it take to actually render something? Excuse me. How much time does it take for a user to interact with your application? So all those things actually are calculated by Chrome and by the search engines to rank you based on that. And it's just 31.2% that actually passed the core web vital, which is interesting. And also, according to the HTTP archive and this survey, 68% of the Angular applications failed core web vitals. This is a stats from 2024. So we don't have a recent stat, but you can still imagine this was the case. And I wouldn't actually expect this to get better, out of nowhere until we are talking about these practices. So there is a cost of JavaScript. The cost of JavaScript is not just the bundle size that your user is downloading. It's also the time that it takes to parse. You have to download the JavaScript, you have to parse the JavaScript, JavaScript has to be compiled, and yeah, all of that can take a lot of time. The parse and compile phase can be 2 to 5 times as long as the download. So if your JavaScript takes 1 minute to download, you can imagine 2 minutes to parse and 5 minutes to parse or compile, which is not so good. So that 2.5 megabytes bundle would feel like 10 megabytes in a lot of cases, especially on mobile, especially in Marrakesh, which I say here because I prepared the talk for them, but essentially anywhere, wherever there is a possibility of a low network coverage or devices that may not be high end. When we look at our Angular code bases, especially when we are looking into some new project, we usually see things like this. We have a bunch of subscriptions, we have ng on in it, we essentially create all, or we get our first subscription, then we pipe, we do a switch map, and then we think, did we actually remember to unsubscribe? And that is a question I think that a lot of Angular developers always think. And even now I sometimes forget, okay, I needed to actually unsubscribe that subject or that behavior subject or that stream. So the traditional development cycle looked like this. We had to read requirements that could take about 30 minutes. We had to design our components, probably 45 minutes, discussing all the use cases, all the parameters, inputs, outputs. Then we write some boilerplate code, could take 2 hours. Then we implement the actual business logic, communicating with the API or not, smart word system components, and whatnot. Then we would also spend some time in the RxJS chains. So this is the part where you actually start to implement your API calls, and then things go wrong. So you have to show the errors, you have to manage your streams, you have to make sure you're making parallel calls versus sequential calls. Which kind of RxJS operators are you really using? Fork, join, combine, latest, switch map, merge map, concat map. There's so many things that you have to go into to actually figure out which is the right thing that you want to use in your application. And then if you're working in a good company, you might actually write some tests. So that could take 2 hours. And then we fix those tests because they usually don't pass the first time. And they take about 1 hour. So finally, you update the documentation, you do some knowledge transfer. It is actually about 14 hours, in my personal experience, for one single feature. Let me know in the chat if you think it takes more than 14 hours on average, if it takes less than 14 hours on average when you are working on an enterprise component or feature. So I would love to know. If you look at my example and my 43 tickets that I talked about, that means that everything is essentially on fire. I have to work on all of this alone, and yeah, it's not fun. Things actually started to change when AI came into my life, so to say. There were multiple possibilities, and experiencing these tools, including the CLI tools, the MCP, agent skills, 2 paths actually emerged for me that I started using immediately. The first part was actually using AI in the application. For example, we have this thing called Web-LLM, where you have the possibility of having a large language model within your web application. And that essentially lives in the user's machine. So you can build applications that understand the user, that can help the users without actually sending data to the cloud. And the second pattern or the path that developed was building actually with AI. So AI assisted development with Gemini, with Klein, with anti-gravity. You could have other tools like Claude Code, Codex. I think today I'm shipping much more code than I could ship like in a year. I can just ship in a month. And I'm right now having, 3 different projects constantly being worked on, features developed on. And it's a really good time to be a developer. I think it's right now is the time that I think it's the most enjoyable for me for actually building something and shipping. So we can ship faster without sacrificing quality, but we have to be a bit careful, of course. So if we go towards the first thing, that is AI in the UI, we do have GPT quality models that are running 80 to 90% native. Speed is entirely in the browser, and the Angular application can think of itself. We are going to look at some of the examples, but I want to focus on right now, why is this important? Why is on-device large language model or on-device AI even a thing? The main requirement comes in real scenarios like this. Let's say you have a medical records application that is that has a bunch of users, and it needs an AI powered search. If your medical records essentially go to Gemini or go to, OpenAI, that means that you're actually sending customer data, private data, or confidential data to third-party APIs, which is not recommended. So the traditional approach would have been, you have your patient data, you have your server where you basically call the OpenAI API from, you get the response, your server then responds back to the user. The big no here is GDPR compliance, and there are further compliances as well. So we cannot have it. We cannot basically send patients confidential data or personal identifiable data to these third-party providers unless we have a contract with them. So the Web-LLM approach is pretty simple. You have your patient data that is, let's say, in the app that has come from your server, of course. You use the browser's AI, which is Web-LLM, and you have the response. There's no data being sent to anywhere at all. This is GDPR compliance. You don't have any problem. Now, when we talk about the on-device large language models, we also have a lot of benefits when it comes to economy, or we can basically save a lot of money. So if you have a chat app, let's say like WhatsApp or something, you have 100,000 users. Let's say they do 50 messages per day. And we are not just talking about any messages. We are talking about messages that are to AI. So they're asking AI questions, they're getting AI help, whatever that may be. If you go to Gemini or OpenAI, let's say your tokens per day are 100,000 users, multiply by 50, multiply by 500 tokens on average, you can say. This is 2.5 billion tokens, all in all. The cost of 2.5 billion tokens, if you're using Gemini, let's say, which is super, super cheap, it still takes you $625 one single day. And your annual cost can go anyway up to 200,000 or 2,200,000. And this is actually not even Gemini 3. This is Gemini 2.5 Pro. So yeah, you can imagine what happens. When we talk about the on-device AI or Web-LLM, you have zero infrastructure cost. Why do I say that? Because infrastructure is where your large language model is. You don't have to have your large language model hosted. You can use something from Hugging Face, for example. So there are a lot of open source providers where you have large language models already deployed there, and you don't have to host them. You don't have to maintain them. You don't even have to have availability of them because they are already out there. There is no API cost when using Web-LLM because your browser is talking to the browser. So you don't even have to make an API call. And that means you don't have any annual cost at all. So it's a great thing if your use case supports that. So the one-time cost that you could have essentially if you're working on your own model that you've trained, you're fine-tuned, you would probably want to host them on a CDN if you're not using, let's say, the open models. which essentially means that you have $50 a month that you are actually talking about, and this is $600 a year. And I'm talking about $600 a year for 100,000 users making 50 messages to AI at least per day. For such a huge scale of users and a company that affords it, I think $600 a year is not a big problem at all. All right. Now let's talk about modern Angular and Signals. So if you know Angular, you know that Signals is probably one of the biggest thing that's happened after Angular 1 to Angular 2. And then now we have the whole change detection, the APIs, all of them are changing based on Angular Signal. So just a quick recap. In the old days, what you would have is you would essentially create a subject, or you could have a behavior subject, you could have an observable, and essentially when you get data, or sorry, when you make an API call, you would use the subscribe method, you would have a variable for your data, and then you would also have to use a take until this subject is destroyed. So this is the regular approach. The problem with this is, first of all, I don't really like the code when we go too nested into doing something. I prefer the async await, so I can see each execution happening in a single line. But this was actually required from us to do. Then we had to remember that we have to pipe it. We had to remember we have to unsubscribe it somehow. And this did not really feel that intuitive. Also, we had to manage the loading of an API call, the error of an API call, which is, I would say, old school. The new modern way that we have is much nicer. When you are working with, let's say, signals, you can have just two signals, or even you probably wouldn't need another signal if you're using something like this. So this is a really minimalistic example of the same thing. So compare this class that you have with this thing that we had. Oh, not that one, but this thing. So I would say this is about 12, 13 lines of code. And here, when we look at the actual code, is like 3 lines of code doing exactly the same thing. So this is what we could do with modern Angular and Angular Signals, which essentially means that we have almost 90% less code. If you had, zero memory leaks, pure beauty. I actually love Signals. Now I'm gonna show you some demos. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go to this application. I'm gonna show you from actually the home page. So when you go to the slides, I'll also add a link where you can, and I'll also give it to the organizer, Mohammed, as well. So you can see the demo as well yourself. But essentially, when you go here, what you do first time is you initialize the AI model. This is going to load a Web-LLM. And once you download it in your machine, it then does not download it again. It essentially has that in your machine, and it just loads it from the cache. So you have to do it only once. So you can see here, it is going from 56 out of 100, etc. So we'll just let it load. And in the meantime, I want to show you this particular piece of code, which is working with Angular Signals. So in here, you have a resource, which is something new in Angular. And if you're interested in more, I would suggest getting the book, because it covers all of these things. But a resource essentially is a signal, or it essentially gives you a signal at the end, where you can make a stream. You can essentially call an API that gives you a streamed content right here. And as you're getting those chunks, you're essentially yielding those, which means that as the message is coming in, you're pushing it to the UI. So you see that typewriter effect that comes in on ChatGPT, on Gemini, that things come or words come one by one. So here is an example of the application itself. So by default, if I go to Gemini here, so this is the app right here. I've already added my Gemini key, but I could clear this. I could go to the API keys and then paste it here. But in here, for example, if I say, try this, explain Angular signals like I'm 5 years old. So this is supposed to talk to the Web-LLM that we have right here. And it is supposed to give us a response, as you can see, right? So all of this is happening in the browser. So someone is asking on the chat, but isn't it using browser API talking to Hugging Face, and isn't the leaking data to Hugging Face? How can I trust that Hugging Face isn't taking the data and learning on it? Really good question. So Hugging Face has the model. When I start the application and I click download, I download the actual model. Now the model is in my device. The model is hooked with the browser. And the Web-LLM protocol that we have right here allows our front-end application to talk to the model right in my device. There's no API call. There's no network call going to Hugging Face at all. Everything is happening in my browser. So we are not really talking to Hugging Face after we have downloaded this. So even if I refresh the page, even after refreshing the page, I don't talk to Hugging Face. I only do it once. If my model is, once my model is downloaded, then essentially it just works from there. So give me 1 second. Yes, so this is one of the examples that we have Angular being explained like I'm a 5 years old. So this is super nice. So this is one example of Gemini itself, and this uses the streaming API, as I mentioned, that you can just use the model, which is the Web-LLM, and in here you can essentially go ahead and use the generate content stream, and you'll find similar examples when you're using Google Gemini or the Firebase GenKit, etc. So this is the first example. Let's move forward. The next example is actually one of my favorites. This was super fun to implement and test out. Imagine an application, a quiz application that trains you for interviews, and when you are actually asking it questions, it adapts its questions based on your level, based on how good you're answering the questions versus how bad you're answering the questions. If you give correct answers, it asks you harder questions. If you give incorrect answers, it gives you easier questions. So an AI that essentially learns at your skill level. So I would be like, this is the kind of tutor that I would require. And again, 100% private, 100% offline, zero API calls, and helps you as it should. So this is what I call intelligent UI. So I'm going to show you the second example here, which is this adaptive quiz. So here I have this quiz right here. And I go here and I say, I'm going to learn Angular signals right here. So this is now starting my adaptive quiz. So a couple of disclaimers. I have not coded or hard coded any questions in the application at all. When I start the quiz, it asks the Web-LLM, the model, that generates the questions. It also generates the kind of question it is going to ask. Sometimes it would ask a question that is a multiple choice questions like this. So this UI is 100% AI generated on the fly, like all of these things. Sometimes it would give you a multiple choice questions. Sometimes it would give you a question that has different check marks. So you could have multiple answers that are correct and you have to select all of them. Sometimes it may just ask a question that requires a text input. So you could type in it and it would analyze again based on AI if your answer is correct or not. So here, for example, here it says, what is the primary purpose of Angular signals? There are multiple options here. So let's say I go with enabling zoneless chain detection, right? So I submit this, you can see this was a correct job. It also gives us the answer. All of this is happening, by the way, completely offline. I could just turn off my network and it would work. Now I go to the next question. So this time also it's going with an easy one, and you could always go ahead and check your history as well. By the way, this project is open source, so you can try to clone it, try it out on your machine, and even, you can
put the link
expand
in
on
the
it.
messages later.
Yeah, absolutely, I will quickly do that in the chat. So this contains both the slides and the code as well. So here now you can see we have a question situation where we have multiple checkboxes, right? So what are the primary benefits of using Angular signals? So I can say improve performance, simplified chain detection, enhanced debugging capabilities, and then all of above. Let's say, let's go ahead with submitting the answers. And here, now you can see, now we have a hard question. So 2 easy questions means I'm too good. So now it's going to ask a hard question from me, and we'll see that when the question comes in, and if I'm not really answering it correctly, then no. AG is asking, did you use A2UI? No, I haven't used A2UI here, but I've created a video on A2UI on my YouTube channel. So we're gonna quickly look at what the question is and try it out as well, but we'll also go a bit forward as well. So here we have, what are the benefits of using Angular signal for chain detection? So now it's asking sort of a similar question, but let's see. Let's say I say simplified code and improve performance, but not the others. So let's see what happens. Does it count it as okay or not? So here you can see not quite. You selected this, And then it says the correct answers are zoneless change detection and reduced memory usage, right? So now that I've done this, the next question is of a medium difficulty. So it automatically analyzes what the next difficulty should be and then also constructs a question as well. Great. So now when we talk about Web-LLM versus cloud APIs and what are the benchmarks essentially, the first token when it comes to Gemini takes 1 to 2 seconds. On device, it takes even lesser. It's like 100 to 500 milliseconds. When we talk about the privacy, obviously the data is sent to Google or other providers. This is 100% local. When you talk about the cost, it's about 2,200, $2,200,000 a year versus $600. Gemini is not available offline. On device LLM is. Here, I would say when you talk about model quality, we have Gemini 3.0 from the Google family, which is the best one. But obviously you have Opus 4.5, you have GPT 5.2, others as well. In here, you also have Llama 3.18 billion, which I'm right now using as the Web LLM. So you could essentially do that as well. And you can also see that where the on-device wins versus where the cloud wins. When you talk about model quality, yeah, you may not be able to, for example, use a local Web LLM model for coding or a really complex task. But for majority of the cases that you would use in your API, your application with the regular users, I think Web LLM still wins. So going forward, I want to also maybe show you some things as well. And all of this is essentially, as I mentioned, this is offline. So I'm going to show you something really quick. So here we have something that you can compare with, I would say, in a very humble and polite manner with Notebook LM. Obviously, it's not as strong as that. But let's say I go ahead and add my document. I could essentially create a title or put the content here, or I can upload a file here. Let's say best practices. So this is the best practices AI documentation for Angular, right? So I add this, and now that I have the document here, I can do some analysis on it, or I could also ask questions. For example, what is the new way of coding switch case statements in the template? So when we are asking questions right here, the Web LLM also provides us the possibility of querying the document. So you have the retrieval augmented generation right here for text documents, and you can obviously have multiple. So here you can see it is mentioning the @switch directive instead of using ng-switch. Now you can obviously give it a better prompt to be more descriptive, be less descriptive, but again, all of this is working offline, and this is awesome. So vibe coding, yeah, I think everybody's talking about that these days, apart from OpenClaw, of course. So what Twitter promised me was essentially that all I need to do is ask good questions, so be better at prompt engineering, and I can ship things faster. But what actually happens is that when you have vibe coding done, you have code like this, like eval, the whole JavaScript. Obviously, that's a security nightmare. You shouldn't be using that at all. And the problem usually comes not in the development environment at all. It happens when you go to production. So we have this thing called the 70-30 rule of AI coding, which essentially means that you have your 30% done, or you can say the visible 30%, which is working features, impressive demos, fast prototypes. But essentially the 70% that's hidden is that important thing. Do you have security? Do you have performance? Do you have accessibility, edge cases? Like all of these things, do you really have them? And that also reminds me of this thing. I'm not really sure if you've seen this thing called Molt Book. That was based on the OpenClaw like agent social media. Have you heard about what's happening, and what security nightmare it is? So all of that is. I have an OpenClaw agent myself, by the way. It's running on a different machine which doesn't have any credentials, so I'm experimenting with it. But that happens when you don't really know how to code, or you don't take measures of security. The person who created Moldbook also tweeted that I did not write a single line of code, and we developers are like, yeah, we know you did not write a single line of code because it's not secure. So we need to remember that the cost of JavaScript is again beyond the download. So when we talk about cost of AI, it's actually even bigger. You could write things really fast, but it takes 5 times longer to actually debug, fix those things, find those gaps. The security audits have to be done manually. You might also be accumulating a lot of technical debt, especially if you're not really using good techniques like context engineering, prompt engineering. You're not creating a new chat when you're moving to a new task. You're not giving it enough information that it needs to do the task. So all of those things essentially keep tabs on you for later, and the team velocity slows over time. So if you're using AI, obviously you would have to use AI in the right way. So what I really like to use inside of vibe coding is something called AI assisted engineering. I think the mindset shift is essentially this. Before, I would be like, I write all the code, but now I architect systems and curate AI outputs. So I have to know about architecture, I have to know about security, I have to know about scalability. All those things are more important than the code, than the syntax, even I would say design patterns. That's arguable. You might even need to tell AI to use certain design principles based on the team, but yes, you don't really need to know code. And that also reminds me of just this week when I was in a conference in Stockholm, and I was trying the Amazon's editor called Kiro for coding. And I actually got bored in 3 minutes. I was like, what am I doing? I'm just waiting for the AI to do something. It's super boring. I want to code. I want to see. I want my brain to actually work, struggle, do something. So in a way, I think I feel a bit bored that I can't, or I don't get to code as much, solve problems as it was. But I think we are finding new problems to solve, or different issues to tackle than actually coding, so to say. So I think this is my workflow that I follow professionally. So what I usually do is that I architect and design the interfaces. I tell AI what kind of design components to use, which approach to take in certain situations. I'm going to see if I can zoom in. So, and then I let AI write some code. I review the code line by line. I make sure that if I am working with AI for multiple tasks, I stage my code first, and maybe I won't commit it, but I would stage it at least so I can see new changes coming in which are not staged. So I review each single line of code. I review every single file. If the quality looks good, then I basically write some unit tests for it, and then when the test pass, then I deploy this. If the quality is not good, if there are issues, then I refine, I reiterate with AI, I give it more design specifications, instructions, best practices and whatnot. Maybe give it an MCP tool, maybe give it some documents so it can understand, okay, this is how I should be coding those. And then once everything is good, then we deploy, then we don't have any issue. So that's my workflow with AI. Good. There are some tools that I would recommend to you. This talk was created before Google Anti-Gravity actually came out. So I used to use VS Code with Klein. I think it's a still really good tool when it comes to working with different models. So you have access to ChatGPT or GPT 5.2. You have Cloud Code. You have all the models that you can use within VS Code if you are a VS Code user. The benefits, of course, are that you can provide context. You can tag files, functions, all those things. It understands your code base structure. It can run commands on your terminal. You have the possibility of running MCP tools as well. And again, this works with different models, which I really like. I really like Gemini 3. I think the developer community basically has, I would say, sort of a consensus that when it comes to actual front-end code or UI, Gemini 3 essentially is probably the best. When it comes to coding or the quality of coding, I think that's questionable. Some people like Opus more, some people like Gemini 3 Pro, some people like GPT 5.2. But I think Gemini 3 is really, really good. Anti-Gravity is my coding editor, to be honest, now. I mean, I do use, as you can see here, I use NeoVim quite a lot just because it's fast, but it's not really that developer friendly when it comes to AI usage. So I use it for just doing things fast. But I think when it comes to a whole integrated development environment / IDE, I like Anti-Gravity quite a lot. And you have free model usage of Claude 4.5 Opus as well, and Gemini 3 Pro. So you do have still a lot of free tier for this one. So I really like it. I would also want you to look into these things called MCP, or what a model context protocol is. How do you configure those? How do you interact with those? How you can add those things? For example, I was working on an MCP. I'm not really sure if I have set it here. No, maybe not in here, but my laptop. So I have an MCP of Telegram, and I use it with my Claude Code or my Gemini, and I can send a message to my OpenClaw bot, or Mold bot, or Claude bot, whatever you want to call it. So I have a situation where I can open my terminal and I can let my AI model in my machine, which is super secure, talk to the Moldbot or Claudebot somewhere else using the Telegram MCP. So once you learn MCP, you'll find a lot of good use cases to try out and play around. It's super, super exciting. When it comes to MCP, it allows this exact thing, that you can give better context, you can give it API calls, you can give it functions, tools, and your output of your AI, of course, is going to be better. And this is the new cool kid in town. We have context engineering, which is far more discussed now than prompt engineering. So I think we are past the prompt engineering techniques, zero shot, few shot engineering, chain of thought, persona, all of those things. We are now looking into this context engineering era. So a quick word on the context engineering itself. When you talk about context engineering, it's not just write a component. It's actually, here is my design system, here are my API types, this is my project structure. Now write me a component that fits perfectly. And here you would also imagine to give the best practices. For example, Angular best practices. If you did not know, we do have angular.dev/AI, where you can find the best practices for large language models. So if you go a bit down here, I think we have it somewhere around here, prompt rules and best practices. So here you can copy essentially all of this. This is what I showed you in the demo for Angular signals, but you can copy this and use it in any of your rules files or your editor essentially. So you can try looking into this as well. Then when we talk about context engineering, MCP is essentially the one that is going to connect your AI, which is trained in maybe late 2025, to the reality which is right now. So I would actually skip this because we don't have much time. And yes, I do want to focus on this one. So when we talked about traditional development, this is what we discussed. We are talking about boilerplate code, 40% takes 16 hours. We have business logic, roughly, and this is per my experience, of course. If this is what traditional coding took, this is the AI assisted coding. So for example, the demo that you saw, the Angular application having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different features, and I can essentially go ahead and maybe generate an email from here. For example, I don't know, John. All of this essentially, if I had to create this from scratch, this is what would happen. This is the amount of time it would have taken. At least I would say 40 hours. Maybe that is essentially a week. Starting from scratch, setting up Tailwind CSS, setting up the design system, creating one component, creating second component, third component. With the AI assisted coding practices with context engineering, it essentially took I would say less than 12 hours. In my case, this application maybe, I don't know, took 4 hours, I would say, because I've been doing this for a while. So here you have the refinement, testing, polish, all of that essentially can be super fast compared to the traditional approach. So one of the things that I wish I would know is that we would always have to validate AI generated code. You would always have to have situations where you would have to run this audit. You will notice something interesting. Even if you use Claude Code, even if you use Gemini, or for example, Google Anti-Gravity, you'll notice that now when you implement a feature, it essentially goes ahead and it tries to run some command that runs test. It could be your unit test, it could be your end-to-end test, or if nothing, it would go ahead and run npx tsc, which means it's running the TypeScript compiler on your projects to see at least if there are no TypeScript errors. And that is baked into these sort of AI tools, for example, Google Anti-Gravity. So it has to make sure that the code that it is generated, it actually works. So all those things are important. So for our Angular applications built with AI, I would recommend all of these things. Running a security check, make sure you have sanitize the outputs, you are running your unit test, you're also checking for performance, for example, virtual scrolling, track by, lazy loading, are they being used? Do we have ARIA labels? And we also got this Angular ARIA now launched as well, so maybe using those. And of course, is the code actually maintainable and scalable? Also, this is the checklist, I would say, for 2025 plus. We would definitely try to ship less than 200 kilobytes of critical JS. And this is not the whole JS. Again, I want to make this clear. This is essentially the JS that your app needs to just load, and then you can lazily load all of the other things automatically. This would essentially rank your applications or your web pages higher on Google search engine and other search engines, of course. So we do code split, we do lazy loading below the fold components, and you might have, if you have not seen this thing here, you can essentially look into this concept of defer. So with deferred loading, you can essentially say, okay, if my component is below the scroll somewhere here, I don't want to load its JavaScript at all. When the page loads, we'll just see this guy. And then as we scroll a bit down, then we will load the rest of the JavaScript. That also makes it faster, ships less code as well. We use compression broadly. This has been something that has been there for years, I would say, since Angular 2, I would say, when we were using System.js. So we would use broadly compression. We implement proper caching strategies for our assets, and we would also make sure that the core web vitals are working as they should. So the mindset should always be that, okay, AI is generating the code. I am going to make sure that it's production ready. That still is the case. We cannot rely completely on AI, at least not so far. I'm going to move a bit forward. Yes. So what would AI not do? It would not understand your business domain. You would have to provide context. It would not debug complex interactions. It can give you a quick happy path, but you would have to find the edge cases. It cannot do architectural decisions. It cannot make those because it doesn't have the foresight of where your team is going, what features you're going to implement in the future, how much scalability do you really need. So all of those things are going to be upon you. You have to ensure security compliance. You also have to empathize with the users, that what we are shipping are going to be used by the users. Is the UX great? Are we shipping less code? Are we making sure that the user does not have their mobile data robbed off them because we are shipping a lot of assets? So we have to make sure all those things. AI will definitely generate boilerplate code faster. It would suggest patterns, approaches. It can write the initial test. I think AI is a great starting point for anything that we want to do today when it comes to coding. And it would document the code clearly. I don't like documentation. I know it's being recorded, but I don't like documentation. But I do like AI writing by documentation, and I can review it and, of course, go from there. And it frees us from higher level thinking. I love this particular part, and I'm shipping, as I said, much more code. So my expertise actually matters much more, not less. And that's the same for you as well. As developers, we are now starting to think, okay, AI is doing all of those things, but what do I do? Well, AI is not doing all the things that I mentioned that it's not doing. It's not taking architectural decision. It's not talking about security, compliance, scalability. So I think we are going in an era where syntax is not the key. Functions, all those things are not as important than actually understanding the structure of your application, the scalability of your application, the domain, the business logic. All those things are much more important. And how to build code, I think software development as a concept is essentially much more important now as compared to programming. So I think here is where we would go. So we are now moving into a paradigm shift where we would previously ideate, design, code, test, and deploy. But now we do essentially intent. We define what is our intent. We generate the code, or we let the AI AI tools to generate code. We curate their outputs. We see, okay, does that make sense? Or we validate them, and then we deploy them. So this is the mindset shift that's happening. So intent is still now matters more. You have to have clear specification. You will see all these tools coming up with this sort of mindset that you have to define this PRD, or the product requirement document. You have to be very explicit. You have to be very detailed into what features you want to build, how should the UI be, blah, blah, blah. And then you let the AI code. So that is essentially where we are going. And I've been using the same approach, and I think I've gotten really, really good results. So curation is a skill, knowing what to keep, fix, reject. You cannot do this if you have not read books. You cannot do this if you have not done YouTube courses or Udemy courses. If you have not read the documentation, how would you know AI code is good or not? Do you accept it or reject it? So I think curation is still a skill that requires a lot of knowledge, prior knowledge, and the validation is critical. We have to test, we have to secure, we have to look into performance as well, and we have to understand the flow. Again, as I mentioned before, we're not looking into syntax now. We don't want to spend time on syntax, but rather concepts. So in my humble opinion, the future we are building has on-device AI. With modern Angular, we have privacy-first applications which are compliant by design for GDPR. We have intelligent UIs, as I showed you, and A2UI is a great example for that. I think we could actually experiment with that, or you have the link to the GitHub repo, you can experiment with that as well. We are going with economy at scale with zero API cost. We are going towards offline capability so people can work on this on their phones, and we are adopting the experience as well. So these are the three things I would want you to try today. We have Web-LLM, we have the client or anti-gravity or Gemini CLI, whichever tool you want to use, and start with signals. Start with standalone applications, start with the new control flow, and start at the Angular signals repository. Okay, I think yes. I don't think I need to mention this, but the fun fact is that the whole application that I showed you, that is built with AI. I did not write a single line of code for this. I obviously curated, I instructed it, I architected it, I gave it the whole specs. I also did not create the slides by hand. So all these slides are actually created by AI as well. But I gave it obviously all the instructions, the framework, etc. So this whole AI slides, what you see here, it essentially just took 2 hours instead of what could have taken 10 hours, I would say. So the tools work, the future is here, and I think you just saw it. So I will share all the resources, etc. And all you have to do is scan this, or I can actually share the link in the chat, which I can find right here, hopefully. I will share the link right here in the chat. There you go. So yes, and I think if you I don't know if anyone reacted to this, but I think there are some buttons. When you open it, you will be able to see some buttons for reactions. You will see this and this and this. So yeah, make sure to give a feedback on how the talk went. I think that's actually it.
That was really.
We can take the questions. Yep.
Yeah. If anyone has a question, you can ask.
I can also share about the book as well. I think
Yeah.
this one is on LeanPub. If you get a copy from LeanPub inside of Amazon, then you get all the future updates as well. For example, Angular Forms is not currently, or Angular Signal Forms is not currently stable, so I'm not adding it as of now. But once it is, then I'm going to be updating the same book, and then you essentially get the update as well. And the code in the link gives you a 50% discount on this as well. So I think it's a yeah, it's a great deal, and you can see the the video as well. And I think on Amazon we got about, I don't know, 16 or 17 people reviewing it at 4.2 out of 5, I think, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, definitely look into this, and if you have any questions, you can ask them now. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
I don't know, Hassan, if you heard about the tool Hash Brown. No, it's really make it easy to integrate AI into React and Angular apps. If you heard about.
Yes, I've heard about it, but I've
Yeah.
not tried it yet. But I think it was introduced maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Summer.
I have to try it.
Yeah, it's really good.
Oh, nice. Definitely look into it. Great. If there are no questions, then I think we can wrap it up. I can imagine you folks, working all the day and then
Yeah.
seeing my face for an hour. I can imagine how difficult that can be. But yes.
So let's wrap up today's meetup. So thank you all for taking the time to join us, and a huge thanks to our amazing speaker for sharing such valuable insights. And that's it. I hope I just want to say thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, and hope you all have a good night.
Yes. Have a good one. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Bye. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam alaikum.